Excellent. Well, morning, everyone. Anyway, if we go to item 1, then apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies?
Jen Morgan, that's all.
Right. Thank you for that. No others from any members? No. If not, we move on to item 2, is declaration of interest. Members of the Fire and Rescue Authority are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal and or prejudicial interest in respective matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000, the Fire and Rescue Authority Standing Orders, and the Members' Code of Conduct. Has anybody got any declarations they'd like to declare? All gone quiet. I have with New Inn Station, so if somebody can note that, please. Nobody got anything else? No. If you do think of something and it comes up on the agenda, if you can declare that as and when, that'd be great. We'll move on to item 3 then, which is the chairperson's announcements. I've got 2 to announce today. I would like to welcome Gillian Garrett, Nick Selwyn, and Charles Rigby and Carwyn Rees from Audit Wales, who will be presenting their reports in the agenda. I know it'll be Nick's last meeting as he is due to retire at the end of the month. So I'd like to record my thanks to Nick for the work he's done with our service and wish you all the very best in a happy retirement. The next one is regarding New Inn Station. I, along with Councillors Alfie Best, Councillor Glyn Holmes and David Isaacs, visited New Inn Station with operators on Monday the 26th of June. It was an informative visit where we toured the existing station and witnessed the pressing need for investment. New Inn Fire Station was officially opened in June 1954 and had had various property work undertaken since. Although it's at the end of its useful life and a new fire station is required. Despite our best efforts, we have been unable to find a suitable new site and have instead approved capital budget to demolish and construct on the existing site. We had an excellent presentation on the proposed design for the new net zero station, which will be constructed in the next 2 years. We also had the opportunity to visit the temporary site, where we will relocate the station and its personnel while construction takes place. I look forward to seeing the progress of this site, and we will receive regular updates at this committee through the capital monitoring reports. And a link to the redevelopment plans website will be shared with members shortly after this meeting. So thank you for that. If we move on to item 4 then, it's to receive the minutes of the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee held on Monday 13th of March 2023, and that starts on page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. Are members happy to note that, or is there anything that any members would like to raise regarding their minutes? No, nice quiet morning, lovely. So, if we can note them, that's great. Thanks very much for that. Right, item 5 then is a revenue outturn report 2022 to 2023. So, could I ask Lisa Mullen, a finance and procurement officer, for that, please? Give a report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the revenue outturn report for the year ended 31st of March 2023. It gives the final position for spend against the revenue budget, which is made up of the 10 unitary authority levies. And this report outlines the differences between this and the last report that came to FAPM in March 23, I believe it was. So the report contains a number of appendices. Appendix 1, which provides, Appendix 1 is on page 19, and that gives an overview of the budget that was set, revised budget, grant, actual transactions, and the revenue outturn position, which comes to £105,000 underspent. I think it's important to note at this point that this is a draft position, as we've not yet completed the external audit process, which is currently ongoing with Audit Wales. Also, in the final column, it provides some variance analysis from the outturn to the original budget set. Appendix 2 provides an overview of the budget and the forecast that we presented to FAPM for each date throughout the year. And it gives us a breakdown then of the variances that are adding up to that forecast position, and a small narrative in the last column. Appendix 3 provides the reserve statement, which gives an overview of the movements into and out of usable reserves. So we have two categories of reserve, usable and non-usable, and this gives the overview of usable reserves, and members will see a slight reduction in reusable, easy for me to say, usable reserves for the year. And then the final two appendices are 4 and 5, and they relate to the grants that we received during the year, and the most useful of those two is Appendix 5. So if I refer members to Appendix 2, what that does for us is tells us the changes since we previously come to Fire Authority. And I just want to draw members' attention to the largest changes here since previous reporting. The first and the biggest is supplies and services. There's an underspend since previously reporting of 371,000 in supplies and services. And this related to a number of areas. More significantly, operational equipment costs, flash hoods. That piece of work could not be completed by the 31st of March, so that's been ring-fenced to carry forward into the new year. So that was 97,000. We had 95,000 of returned uniform costs. Some of that related to the industrial action that didn't go ahead, so the returns come back in and they credited against the budget. We had 92,000 of unspent IT licenses. They were attached to some IT work that we hadn't completed, so they'll now be costed out of the 2023-24 year. A smaller variance underspend on the hydrant repair budget of 38,000, and that relates to the amount of work that Welsh Water can do for us. And some small underspends then over a number of areas relating to kitchen equipment and furniture out on station and in control, and that comes to 52,000. And they come back to your biggest variance of 371. The second largest area there for members to note is the employee costs. We went 215,000 over on our previous forecasts, and that relates to three main areas. 64,000 of that relates to increased pension costs as a result of the pay awards that were agreed towards the end of the last financial year. We had 3 additional ill health retirements that pushed costs up there by 70,000. That's a reactive budget, and it depends when those ill health retirements come through as to what the final position is. And then we had 55,000 for travel and subsistence costs. And that was linked to industrial action, training in particular, and accommodation. And they all come back to the variance, the overspend there of 215,000. The third largest area is capital costs, and members will remember that this relates to the amount of capital investment that we undertake. So this is where the revenue budget links to the capital monitoring budget. So we spent less. We spent £1.6 million less on capital investment than we planned, and that resulted in 116,000 reduction in spend there. And the actual area of capital financing is the MRP, or the minimum revenue provision charges. They reduced accordingly. And then we've got some smaller pieces then in, we had additional grant income of 87,000, and the costs are up above then throughout. And we had some smaller spends in premises related, and that was repairs, maintenance, so 40,000 there, and some NNDR rebates as well come in, and that came back to the 86 or 87,000 there in property. So that's the overview of the changes since previous reporting in March to members. That's given us a final position of £105,000 underspent, which is a good result for us. As members will be aware, it was a difficult year for us with pay awards and industrial action. As I mentioned, that's in draft and is subject to change as a result of the external audit process. And Julian will cover off when that is potentially going to finish with us. And the recommendations, over to you, Chair, for the recommendations.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to ask before we go to the recommendations, on page 26 is an antisocial behaviour position vacant. Have we rectified that since, or have we taken anybody on board to do that? That's what concerned me, because there's a lot of coordination with the antisocial team, you know, with the community. So that's the thing that stood out to me, being a local member.
I can ask, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't expect an answer now, but I was just concerned that we, you know, the position had been filled. That was all after.
It's probably worthwhile clarifying, Chair. I don't think anybody is keeping that post vacant for a particular reason. It's just a matter of filling it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. The recommendations of the outturn position and consequent transfer to the usable reserves of the revenue surplus is received and noted. Does somebody happen to propose and second that?
Yeah, it's moved by in the room, Chair.
Yeah, anybody second it? Councillor Paul, you second it? That's great, thanks very much. Did you want to do a vote for that, or are you quite happy to do it through that?
Yeah, if you want it, well, just unless there's any members have got any objections, Chair.
Yeah, any members' objection, or are they quite happy to move it forward? Yeah, that's okay from here anyway. So we move that one then. Right, we then move on to item 6, which is the capital outturn report 2022 to 2023, and that's on page 29. And I think that's you, Lisa, again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the capital outturn report. This is the final report for 22-23 for the year ending 31st of March 2023. It gives members information on what we spent our money in for capital for the year. There's an appendix, there's 2 appendix attached to this. Appendix 1 gives an overview of the budget, project costs, variances and slippage. And Appendix 2 gives information on the grants that we've secured during the year to be able to progress capital schemes. There's been a change of since previous reported of 1.6 million. It's a reduction in previously reported expenditure, and the report gives an overview of where the changes have occurred. So if I draw your attention to 2.2 issues, this table provides members with an overview of the budget set for the year. So slippage coming into 22-23 and budget set. So we had a £12 million budget for the year. We actually spent 7.9 million, or 7,857, and we've got out of that 4.2 million left remaining to carry forward into 2023-24. Underneath that, we've got the capital financing consequences of that. initially we were seeking to borrow the majority of that budget, so that 11,821 there, with a small revenue contribution of 200,000. The actual position changed somewhat. We managed to secure 1.4 million of grant funding, and Appendix 2 gives detail of that. So the largest piece of funding that we received in the year from Welsh Government was 990,000 for USA, followed by DIM equipment, so it's operational equipment, and EV chargers to progress our green projects. So we've got 1.4 of grant funding. We also received some capital receipts in the year. That's generally from fleet vehicle sales. So we use that then to fund investment in further fleet. And we borrowed 6.2 million in the year. Underneath there is a update on since previous reporting. It falls into three main areas. There's the largest of is £820,000 difference on fleet. That relates majorly to water ladders. There's 780,000 weren't completed during the year, but were delivered in April. So the vehicle replacement programme is now up to date. Because of that cut-off period of the 31st of March, we had to slip forward the 1.7 million of budget there to accommodate the completion of that, that vehicle replacement programme. There's some smaller bits on the estate car. Out of 9, 1 was left outstanding at the end of the year, and they add back to the 820,000 different from this report to last report. And then in property, we reported a £460,000 reduction in spend, and that falls over a number of areas. The biggest of these is the USAR project, which we've got grant for. We've received the final account, and there was a £113,000 difference. And then also Pontyclean, we didn't spend what we forecast last time. And there's been some progress with Pontyclean since this report was written. I can confirm that the surveys on the property have been conducted. There are no bats there, and hopefully the old firehouse on the Pontyclean site will be demolished, which is what those costs related to by the end of this summer. So there's slippage there going forward into the new year for the Pontyclean project. There's some smaller bits there on preventative maintenance, equality, diversity and inclusion works, and the detail of there is contained in the report. A smaller variance is contained within equipment, and that relates largely to RTC or rescue tender equipment. And that was again due to the cut-off point of the 31st of March, with delivery soon after taking place. So that gives an overview of the difference in variance in reports since last time of 1.6 million. What that means is we're slipping forward 6 million into 23-24 to complete our projects. Appendix 1 gives an overview and some detail of what they are. There was 1.9 million of overspend. The majority of that is due to grant funding. So we've had the funding in to offset those overspends, and a £7.9 million final position for grants. And again, that's notwithstanding the external audit process, which is yet to complete. Underneath there, we've got some financing of how that 7.9 is made up. And we've got a final table there in paragraph 3, which provides an overview of how we intend to fund the overspends, what we're doing with our money and the impacts. Unless there's any questions, I'll hand you back to the chair.
Any questions from any of the members?
Question, Chair.
Yeah.
Um, if you go back to page 31, Liz,
Yes.
point 2.43
Yeah.
with Monmouth.
Yes.
What can be expected on a from our co-location partners? Because it says in appendix when
Yes.
we spent £12,000 on that. Is that just for the plans being designed and drawn up?
Yes, so it's initial scoping work, so it is concept designs. We're hoping we're going to have an answer on this in the next sort of 6 months, because that's a joint co-location with Gwent Police and WAST.
Yeah, well, my question was, if we've spent 12 grand having the plans done,
Yeah.
to accommodate those two services, shouldn't they have paid a third towards the plans?
They will do. When we get the final account, we agree, we're still in talks about what the split is. So it's not an even three-way split.
Yeah,
And we'll do the recharging then when we know what the final position is on that.
thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? The only question I got is with the solar panels and everything on headquarters and the rest of the buildings,
Yes.
is there an initial cost to us, and when will we look to make savings on that?
Yeah, so the initial cost relates to our structural engineers that we've had in to look at the estate. So for solar panels, 2 sites in particular have driven the cost that you can see there. It's Barry and headquarters, to see if the roofs can actually take the weight of solar panels. And it came back, the initial feedback we had was inconclusive, so we undertook a second sort of revisit of that work, and we think that we can actually do it now on Barry Station. So it's going to take a while to actually fit that out, Chair, and to reap the benefits of reduced energy costs.
Yeah.
Of course, we will see the energy reductions will come through on the revenue budget.
Yeah, no, that's great. As long as we got our approach and we're moving forward, it's good
Yes.
for our environmental part of the climate change. Yeah.
Yeah, just on that one with the headquarters site, it has been identified as a ideal location for solar panels. Unfortunately, the roof is in such a condition it'll probably need replacing in probably 2 to 3 years. So it's probably at present time, it was where the liability would lie if we was to put solar panels on it, and should we need to replace the roof sooner. Obviously taking the panels back off or under, sort of take them off to do remedial works. So it's just a case of sort of pausing the decision on that one at this point, and looking to sort of integrate it into a wider project later down the line.
Yeah. No, that's great, as long as we got a plan anyway. So clearly we are looking at that then. So thanks for that. Is there any more questions before we go to the recommendations? No? Well, the recommendation that this report is noted that members are to approve the budget slippage as detailed in Appendix 1. So somebody happy to move that and second it, and everybody agrees.
Move, Chair.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
So everybody agree with that? Anybody abstaining or? No? Well, thank you for that anyway, and thank you for the report, Lisa. We'll move on to item 7, which is the internal audit progress report and audit action updates on page 41. And that's Lisa again. Sorry, I thought he was gone.
You don't have to listen to me for this one. We have Steen from our internal.
Steen, I did see Steen, but I didn't have it on my report. Well, over to you, Steen.
So thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lisa. Morning, members. Yeah, as the Chair said, there's 2 reports and a progress report to feed back to you. The first of the reports is relating to station visits. Members might be aware or remember from last year we undertake an annual visit to a series of station visits, trying to combine a combination of whole time, on-call, and also co-location. So this year we looked at Merthyr, Pontypridd and Abertillery. We're doing a combination of checks and tests around financial management, health and safety, also equipment management as well on site. So overall, for this one, reasonable assurance, there's 2 important and 2 routine recommendations. In terms of the recommendations themselves, so there was one relating to establishment of a procedure for banking monies raised through charity fundraising. And there is perhaps an issue of some money's been retained for perhaps longer than it perhaps might have been. 2 recommendations then relating to asset inventories and red kite, so differentiating between the 2, and then subsequently also reconciliation of items on site, because I think there was some items wrongly recorded on the registers that were present, and also one recommendation relating to PAT testing on station. So the programme of PAT testing needs to be updated and implemented. I think that was a recommendation we made last year as well, and it will be something we pick up this year in the property compliance audit we've scheduled in for later in the year. So I'm happy to take any questions on this report at this stage.
Anybody got any questions you'd like to ask Dean regarding that part of the report? No, I think we're all right. Dean, for the next one.
Go one in the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, sorry,
Yeah,
Steve,
sorry, you
you're
can't
gonna
see
go
the
into
hand. Yeah.
the report, or is that a précis of the whole thing? So,
Yes,
sorry,
that's a summary of the whole thing. Were there any particular questions on the report or the content?
the questions that I had, I didn't know if the PAT testing had slipped over the 2-year limit due to COVID with people going around, in which case it's no one's particular fault, is it? I didn't know what is it. The PAT testing is normally spot on. You've made mention of putting paper lists in first aid kits, but I thought that's the whole point of having it on the computer on a red kite list, was not to do paper lists. And I wonder what TIAA stands for, because I can't find it anywhere.
In terms of the PAT testing, my understanding would be there's usually a programme of testing across all stations in line with the timescales for the particular types of equipment. I think I'm not sure the reasons why that programme hasn't been updated. I'm not sure if it's COVID or not, but we've had assurances that the programme will be put back in place. In terms of the first aid.
Steve, if I may, I think that is a contract management issue, which the facilities team are picking up. So I can feed that back to you outside of the meeting, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You okay with that, Ian?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions before Steve moves on to the next part of the report?
Yeah, what did TIA
Oh, it's
say?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'll leave that to
Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, the Internal Audit Association. I think that's right.
So that's a mouthful anyway, but go on. All right, Steve, would you like to go on to the second part of it?
So the next report then in your pack is mitigating controls. Again, this is one we tend to do on an annual basis. We look at, we select a couple of risks from the risk register and look to provide assurances that the mitigating controls or the actions assigned to each risk are being implemented or have been implemented. So this time around, we were looking at industrial action, cyber risk, pensions change impact, and fire safety bill. No major issues to report. All of the mitigations and risks were being managed in accordance to the way they were described within the risk register. There was just one recommendation, I think, mainly due to timing. So the risk in relation to the fire safety bill, members will be aware that that kind of risk has changed over time as Grenfell, the outcomes Grenfell has been become realised, and the changes in terms of the fire bill and the new act in 2023. At the point of the audit, there was an intention that an action plan based on the new requirements would be produced. So the recommendation was purely to follow through on that action and produce that action plan, which will then be uploaded in Bemis, and you'll see that again that has been accepted as a recommendation going forward. So again, happy to take any questions.
Any members got any questions for Steve? No? that's all right then, Steve. You can carry on with the next one if you would, please.
Yeah, so the final reporting pack is what we call a SICA, so Statement of Internal Control Assessment, which is a posh word for progress reports, which is updates on where we are with the plan. Now, this time around, because of the timing, we've still yet to finalise all the work for 2023, but we're hoping to do that in the next couple of weeks. And the other thing just to report is the plan for 23-24 is progressing. In between producing the progress report and the meeting today, there have been some changes in relation to some of the audits. We've replaced the risk management audit for the year with a core controls, HR core review, looking at some of the modules and the use of the modules. We've also looking to defer the Airwave Emergency Services Network project with a payroll audit, which has just been concluded, and the report will be issued a draft in the next couple of weeks as well. So I'm happy to take any questions on the progress report.
Anybody, any members got any questions for Steve?
No.
Can I ask Steve how many stations you actually visited, or was there all of them, or?
I do have a list somewhere. I think the intention usually is to get around them all through the program, but yes, we do 3 a year, and we've been doing it for so at least as long as I've been with TIA for 10 years. We've at least visited 30. I know we've done different stations over that time, so we've at least visited 30 in the last 10 years, I think.
So
but I do have the
where
figures.
they all are then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank
thanks
you.
for that. Any other members would like to ask Dean anything? No? Right, here we go then. The recommendations. Members are asked to note the internal audit recommendations and work completed to date on the internal audit plan 2022 to 2023. So all members happy to note that? That's great. Thanks very much for that. And thank you, Steve, for the reports. Move on to item 8, which is a Treasury Management Monitoring Report. That's a mouthful. And that is Lisa again, I think.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this is the first year we've brought Treasury Management reports to committee, and the reason for that, we brought to members previously, there was a change in the Treasury Management and Prudential Code, and it required more regular reporting to members, although not necessarily through full fire authority. So this is a fairly succinct report. Mostly because the finance team are working on the accounts at this point. So I think we've got to find a better way to provide members with this information in Q1. It was also very difficult as our Treasury advisors, and we work with Link on our horizon scanning work, interest and inflation forecasts. To get some templates, and that wasn't ready either. So this is just an overview and a reminder of what we've agreed in the Treasury Management Strategy for 2023-24. So the reminder is set out in paragraph 3. It gives members an overview of the limits and thresholds that we set for the year. And what this report does is it lets members know that we haven't breached any of those limits or indicators or thresholds, and that everything is working as it should. It sets out that the budget for 23-24 for capital, which primarily drives our treasury activity, is the budget is 10 million plus slippage that we've just covered off of 6 million. So there's 16 million for capital investment activity in 23-24. The actual spend between the 1st of April and 22nd of June, as I said, we couldn't finish a full quarter before we collate the data, is just shy of £2 million so far. So budget monitoring activities will take place now throughout June and July, and we'll have a more up-to-date position to provide members with by the 30th of September in the next FAPM meeting. So the report talks about how we plan to finance the above expenditure. It touches on the recent increase in Bank of England rate up to 5%, and it discusses that the original forecasts were that rate was going to come down, and that's important to members from the point of view of when we are going to borrow. And it looks like as if we are going to need to borrow by the end of this year, and rates will be higher than they have been for the last few years. I think it's important to note at this point that our debt book is of fixed rate borrowing for the long term. So the rate changes do not alter any of those borrowing costs. The new high rates affect new borrowing, which will be undertaken, like I said, by the end of this calendar year. There's some information there given on our current account rates, and also what we currently have out with our various counterparties being the people that we deposit money with. So there's two current accounts there with Lloyds and Barclays, and a deposit out with Standard Chartered. And that's it really, unless there's any questions.
Anybody got any questions for Lisa regarding that report? No, I think you explained that pretty good there, Lisa. Well, the recommendation, if nobody's got any questions, the Finance, Audit and Performance Management Committee is asked to consider and note the contents of the report. Are all members happy with that?
Yes.
That's great, thanks very much. We then move on to item 9, which is Performance Monitoring Report, the 1st of April 22, the 31st of March 2023, and that's on page 101. And I've got Dewi. That should be
No,
there.
Chair, Dewi gives his apologies, Chair, he can't attend the meeting today, so Area Manager Dean Loader is going to present the
Oh,
report.
right, that's great, yeah. I thought it was quiet in the hall. Would you like to give me a report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Yeah, on behalf of Dewi, then you've got in front of you from pages 101 onwards is the performance monitoring report. And my understanding is that this was delivered at Fire Authority last week. So I believe you would have had all the information in there with Dewi presenting the contents of the report for the last financial year. In terms of the key items, which would be on page 106, and that's covering the strategic indicators for that financial year. So these covers the data over the 7 strategic indicators which we report to the Welsh Government on. And as you can see from those targets set for that year, then obviously 5 of those 7 had increased and we've gone over. 1 was on amber, and then the total RTCs attended and at state green with a reduced number. Over the next few pages, it gives you the graphs for each of those 7 strategic indicators. First one being total fires attended compared to the target, which has risen and gone over by 8% for the financial year. That's got up in several categories of that data set. So that's accidental fires, deliberate fires, grass fires and refuse fires had all increased over the last financial year. On the next graph, top of page 108 is the total false alarms attended compared to the target. And again, this has increased by 5%. And I understand the report come up around false alarms within these papers today. Bottom of page 108 is total road traffic collisions attended, which have decreased by 1%. And then the next one, total other service special calls attended, and this one had risen quite significantly by 14%. And that's affected by things such as flooding, release of persons, assisting other agencies, which has increased significantly by 36%. And that includes things and categories such as bariatrics, suicide calls as well. Bottom of page 109, which is total fatalities and injuries attended. Again, this has gone up and has increased by 7% over the previous target that was set. Top of page 110 then, we've got a graph giving the data for total accident and fatalities and injuries compared to the target, and this was an 8% increase as well. And at bottom of page 110, percentage of dwelling sites confined to room of origin, and this has gone below the target that was set. I think, speaking to Dowie, that the 7 strategic indicators there, I think the targets that were set were quite stretching, and I think it was a good keen ambition from the service to keep those targets at a set level compared to the pre-COVID targets, etc., that have been set. So they were quite stretching, and obviously we'd increased by 5 of those indicators. The remainder of the report then goes into UAs and gives you a lot of in-depth analysis in and around each of those indicators, and particularly down to unitary authorities, particular areas. So I think that concludes the content of the report, Chair. I think it was probably covered last week, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any from members.
Anybody got any questions or anything?
Yeah, can I just make a comment? Looking at this,
Yeah, go on.
seems that 2019-20 was very high in a lot of areas. Was there any particular reason for that? It just seems that that is a lot higher than we're doing now, even though we have gone up a bit in places. Was there any special reason for that?
I'm not sure, Councillor, on going back. I'd have to find out that detail around the 19 to 20 figures.
Just seems that, then suddenly the next year it's dropped a lot. And I don't know, obviously we have gone up a bit in places, but not tremendously.
Yeah, I can find that information.
I think, Councillor, obviously the drop in figures, the next year was predominantly around through the COVID periods.
Yeah, so nobody went anywhere, nobody at 75. Yeah, I can understand that drop, but I was just thinking, we haven't quite gone back up to that yet, thank goodness. Hopefully we won't. Thank you.
Sorry, and I missed the fire authority meeting last week, so if this was covered then, I apologise. Deliberate fires up 8% and false alarm malicious up 17%. Is that any correlation between us having the antisocial behaviour post vacant, even though it's not on purpose? I didn't know if there was a link between those two figures. And at the bottom of page 109 and the top of page 1010, it's total fatalities and injuries attended, and then underneath there's total accidental fatalities and injuries. And I didn't know what the difference was, Dean, sorry.
Yeah, I'll touch on your last point first, Councillor, if that's okay. So the bottom of page 109, which is the graph, total fatalities and injuries. So that covers all areas and injuries, fatalities across all categories. Right. However, compared to the top of page 110, which is the total accidental fatalities, so that's a separate strategic indicator around people where we have accidental deaths in properties, etc., and RTC data.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, question?
Any other questions?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't know if there was any link between the antisocial behaviour post.
Yeah, no, good point. That was something I thought about, yeah.
And the false alarm malicious. If it was where people aren't being educated, not through our fault, because we want to fill a post, but I didn't know if there was any correlation between how long the post been empty and those figures going up.
Yeah, we don't believe there is a link there. Fair Council, I think the deliberate fires we've seen a spike there, and that was mainly and predominantly in around grass fires, right, and the warm weather periods. Yeah. But it is linked obviously to some ASB elements, but we don't believe that post would have a vital impact, because obviously operation crews are delivering the educational messages through various formats, and that continually goes on regardless of us missing one particular educational post.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll help me there. And don't forget the unitary authorities, the ones you got there, you're able to share with other members of your authority, which is, I find very useful when they ask me questions. It's down for them to see their own copy. So just to remind you on that. But yeah, no, thank you for the report. Anyway, we have seen it previously. So yeah, that's great. Any more questions for anybody before we move to the next one? No. Well, thank you for the report anyway. Now move on to item 10, which is Audit Wales Plan 2023. That's page 121, and that's Gillian to give the report. She was anticipating ready.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
This is our 2023 audit plan, which just sets out the work we plan to do to discharge our statutory responsibilities and informs you when it will be undertaken, how much it will cost, and who will undertake the work. So there's just a couple of things in the plan I'd just like to draw to your attention. Our audit responsibilities just set out on page 6 of the report, which set out the responsibilities to audit the financial statements and give an opinion on the truth and fairness of them, and our performance audit work to discharge our duties in relation to value for money and sustainable development. So our financial statements audit is based on our assessment of the risks of material misstatements. So in undertaking our work, we adopt a concept of materiality, and the materiality levels we work to are set out on page 9 of the report. So I'd just like to mention then that our audit approach has always been based on our assessment of the risks of material misstatement, but this year, 22-23, is the first year that audits are required to be carried out under a revised auditing standard, ISO 315, and further details of this standard and what it means for the audit are set out in Appendix 1. So based on the planning work we've done to date, we identified one significant risk, which is set out in Exhibit 1 on page 10, which is the management override of controls, which is always viewed as a significant risk in all bodies in accordance with auditing standards. We also identified 2 other risks or areas of focus, which are set out in Exhibit 2 on page 11, which are the valuation of pension fund net liability and the valuation of land and buildings. And both of those areas are estimates that involve a high degree of estimation uncertainty and are sensitive to small adjustments in assumptions. Hence, we determine those to be areas of audit focus. Now, if we move on to details of our performance audit work, which is set out in Exhibit 4 on page 14, and that will cover thematic review, targeting prevention, and then the audit of the improvement plan and assessment of performance under the local government measure. Page 16 then sets out our estimated audit fee for 22-23, which is 84,200. That reflects a fee increase of 4.8% for inflationary pressures and then a further increase of 10.2% for the estimated impact of the revised auditing standard on our financial audit approach. And that's all I'd like to say, and I'm very happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Any questions from any of the members? No? The only
Did
question I-
Gillian, but you've answered it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The only question I got is about the buildings and the value. With the current financial market, the buildings are up and down like a yo-yo with the estimation. Do you take that into account with your audit, or are you just giving an overall, assessment at that particular time?
We do look at how you valued buildings, yes, and whether the value at the 31st of March is, or the value in the accounts does reflect the actual value on the 31st of March. This is why, as you say, it does go up and down. The inflation, impact of COVID, etc., has had quite a big impact on property valuations. So that is one of the reasons, yes, that we do have it as an area of focus.
Right. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, it's just a very turbulent time for financial markets. That's the reason. Any other questions for Gillian before we decide to note report? No?
No question, Chair, but just to say that myself and Charles will be moving off the audit from performance audit at the end of August. And our colleague Karen is attending the meeting today, will be taking over the performance audit work. So it's a good opportunity for members to meet Karen directly, and no doubt he'll be in touch.
Yeah, well, thank you for that anyway. So we're happy to note all that, and Pam is okay with that. And thank you very much, Gillian, for your report.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to item 11, which is a draft statement of accounts, 2022 to 2023. And that's on page 143. And Chris, do you want to meet him for that?
I think Lisa's going to have a go at it for you.
Oh, Lisa again, good gosh. I'll
Thank
write
you,
that
Chair.
in.
So this report provides an overview of the draft statement of accounts for the year ending 31st of March 2023. So producing this document is a statutory requirement, and also statutorily required is an audit and for it to be published then, so all our stakeholders can view it. So I believe a separate link has been sent out to members to see this document. It's quite lengthy, it's about 105 pages in total. So the Treasurer is responsible for preparing the statutory statement of accounts and the information that's contained within that. As I said, this relates to financial years, and the financial year just closed. The provisional sign-off date has moved from the 31st of July to the 30th of November. There's no change on that, Gillian?
No change at the moment. Obviously, if we could do it sooner, we will, but we are committed to sign off accounts by the end of November for those that gave us their accounts on time.
Lovely. So that's the timelines at the moment, and for the reasons that Gillian has outlined. The Treasurer signed off that our draft accounts was produced by the 31st of May, and our Treasurer signed them off. They are subject to change as a result of the audit process. And the audit, I can confirm that the audit has been ongoing for a number of weeks now, for about the last 6 weeks, and seems to be going well. The actual statement of accounts itself, as I said, quite a lengthy document. It's got some narrative and contextual information at the beginning there, and then the crux of the statement is the 4 main statements, which is the CIES, or the Comprehensive Income and Expenditure Statement, which provides a picture of our financial performance for the year, and it gives the accounting cost of running the service. And then there's the MIRAs, which is the movement in reserve statement. It gives an overview of what we have on the balance sheet for usable and non-usable reserves, the impact running the service has had on reserves, and how we've used reserves to deliver some of our services. And then thirdly, there's the balance sheet. It's an interesting statement. This is a statement of financial position, and it gives an overview of our fixed assets, current assets, liabilities and provisions. And then at the bottom there, because we do balance those things out, we've got a list of the reserves that we have in place to support those things. Fourth, there is the cash flow statement, and this gives an overview of how we've used our cash and bank funds to deliver services. So what we've had from operating processes, from financing and investing activity. And it's an important statement because it does give an indication when looked year on year of our how we manage our cash, and can give an indication of ongoing insolvency. And then finally, we've got the Firefighter Pension Fund, which is on the final statements of the statement of accounts. Between the last cash flow statement and the Firefighter Pension Fund, there's a list, there's a whole raft of notes there relating to specific areas, and they are all subject to audit. So I won't go through it in any more detail, but I will take questions if there are any.
Any members got any questions for Lisa on it?
No.
Can I just say, I'd like to thank the team who prepared that, because there was a lot of work that's gone into that. So if you could pass on my regards with the appreciation for that. It was good bedtime reading as well, but yeah.
If you're struggling, yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. That's very, very comprehensive. So anybody else got any questions before we move on? As long as members note that, anybody happy to note that? Sure, yeah, excellent. Right. We'll now move on to item 12. It's the ordered wills fire false alarm reduction on page 147. And I'm going to say that Nick Salmon is going to prevent this, and it will be his very last one on the fire service before he retires. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Myself and Charles will present the report. As ever, I do the fun bit, Charles does the work. Just to talk briefly about the work itself. So this is a piece of work that we've done across the 3 fire and rescue authorities. So each of the services has received a similar report. We have the report going to Mid and West next Monday, and I believe it's going to North Wales sometime in September. So the information that's contained in the report is fairly consistent across the 3. So at that time, when all the reports have been published on each of the authorities' agendas, you'll be able to compare where you stand in comparison to your neighbouring authorities in Wales, which I think is really helpful. I don't want to go into the detail of the report. Charles will talk about that, but I think it's really important to set the context of why we've done this work. And there's a number of things set out, I believe, in the numbering that you're using for the committee, page 152. I think the first thing to say is that we do realise that fire and rescue services are going through an incredibly tough time, and this has been ongoing for 10 years. So in the report, hopefully it captures some of the contextual stuff that really explains some of the challenges that you face as an organisation. We know that the national framework that the Welsh Government set in 2016 has certain expectations placed on you as an organisation, and there's an expectation from Welsh ministers that you will be tackling fire false alarms and looking to reduce the numbers that you have to deal with and how you respond to them. So that's the starting point really at a national level. Below that, we also know that there's some expectation being placed on you through recent thematic reviews undertaken by the Chief Fire Advisor to the Minister around training and use of resources, and some of those present challenges that you no doubt as an authority are thinking about. But just to contextualise, that's another added pressure that you have to deal with. And thirdly, and probably the biggest one, is that we're well aware of the resource and capacity challenges you as an organisation have had to deal with since 2009-10. The report touches briefly on some of those figures. I think it's about £50 million real terms reduction in funding and a loss of around 14% of your staff. So we know that within the context of this demand that you should, from Welsh Government, really be focusing on fire false alarms, there are some operating issues that you as an organisation need to bear in mind and consider. And the rest of the report then talks about where you are in terms of your policy, the things we think you do really well, and then some areas where we think there could be some improvement. So I'll hand over to Charles, who will run through that. And as with all our reports, members, we're always very happy to take comments and questions. Charles?
Thanks, Nick. So the overall conclusion that we've reached from the work is that the authorities made progress in its approach in managing fire false alarms, and that this can go further by the best use of data and learning from elsewhere. One of the things that we picked up during our field work is the key strength that the authority has with the BEMIS system, and it's about using that as a basis to take the next step, using the data and the insights that's collected to form and shape the policy to get the numbers down even further. We've also outlined that there's a local approach to this, that local stations can weigh up the local risks and the focus involved in that. And we've recognised the important work the authority has done working with the NHS, and we're now suggesting that the authority takes that further to other key stakeholders and to organisation and industrial groups that also cause false alarms. There's been a real reduction in the volume caused by the NHS, and it's now about looking to other sectors to involve them into tailoring an approach as well. And then another key area that we've picked up is how information is presented to members such as yourselves. This is so that you can get a real window into how the authority is performing. As the report outlines, there's a 4-stage approach that the authority takes, but the information that comes to you doesn't allow you to see that in a very clear manner. So we believe that if you saw that with greater clarity, it would allow you to scrutinise and get a sense of performance in a better way. And the report also contextualises some of the approaches taken by other authorities across England and Wales. Just because there is no blanket approach, we recognise there is no magic solution to this, and it's very much has to be based around local approaches and local risk. And our report is kind of aiming to say the approach you've got in place, appears to making progress in some areas, and it's about taking it the next step further in using the insights, the stakeholders and the data to really tailor it to lead to further reductions. So as Nick said, we're happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you for that. Any members got any questions?
Can I use one, please? On page 154, you've got the circle in the middle, and the green bit's malicious, and a little bit of blue there, it's good intent. You've got the other one, due to apparatus.
Yeah.
Now, what causes that then?
So that's the categories there are the set by the Home Office, and there's the standard that all fire authorities use, and that can be down to automatic fire alarms being activated by
Accident.
smoke or by steam or by insects. So it can be from a variety of things. Yeah.
Oh, see, yeah, because it seemed rather a lot, and I thought, well, if that's apparatus, what's wrong with the apparatus? But it isn't actually anything wrong with the apparatus. Then it's just
Not necessarily.
incidental things. Yeah. I suppose the worst bit is the malicious, isn't it? So, thank you. It just intrigued me as to why there was so much of that.
Any other questions?
Sorry, could I come in just to update the members in the room that weren't available last week? Obviously, this report was taken to the full fire authority last Monday. The reason being is that obviously we've taken the seriousness of the report and to get the whole authority approach in terms of whether we accept or take on board the comments or the recommendations that were made by Audit Wales and the service's response to those recommendations. I think it's fair to say that there was a positive view across the room last week, and that the officer responsible for this particular piece of work, Group Manager Steve O'Connor, made a presentation to members. Fully accept all the recommendations that were made in the report, so we take on board them in a positive fashion and look to take that forward. So the recommendations made by the Fire Authority were that we accept all the recommendations and the responses made, and that the Unwanted Fire Signals Working Group would come back with a further report in 6 months to the Scrutiny Committee. So that picks up on that piece of work which Charles was saying then about members having oversight and the opportunity to scrutinise the work that's done in that area.
Yeah, thanks for that, Karen, because I was going to say a couple of them points. But the other part of that is, with a fire false alarm, we're never going to, we can reduce it and try and deal with it, but we're never going to eliminate it. So we've got to do the best we can with what we got. So any other questions? No? If not, I'd like to thank you and thank the Audit Wales team for turning up, and good luck, Nick, on your retirement. We move on to item 13, which is the Forward Work Programme for Finance, Audit and Performance Management Committee 2023 to 2024, page 173.
It's the standard work programme, Chair, unless members want any additional items added to it or anything amended in the programme. It's as is set out for the remainder of the municipal year.
Is members happy with what's on there and noted, or does anybody want to add anything or say anything to Karen? No, we're all quiet this morning, but subdued. I'm very lovely and calm. I like it. So no, we're happy to take that forward, and thank you for that, Karen.
Such a good job. That's why we're quiet.
Yeah, it must be the calmness in the HQ. Item 14, to consider any business of the chairperson deemed urgent. I've got nothing. So thank you all for the meeting this morning. It's been excellent, and for your input. And enjoy the rest of the day. At the end of the meeting, and thank everybody for turning up. So,